the entire White House lawyer staff call themselves communists, and I point out they're not communists, they're banker looters. And you've got to be hiding on the other side of the moon to not get that. Bob Chapman, comments on what he was just saying.
I think you covered it, Alex.
I mean, John, that's
the beginning and end of it.
I mean, you call in with the same crud every time. Obviously, the government infiltrated right-wing groups and left-wing groups. We're here exposing that. I just did 2 days on COINTELPRO exposing that. And you're telling me I'm engaged in COINTELPRO when I'm pointing out I don't want to live under communism. John, stay there. I want to come back with you and Bob, because I want to just ask you a question. Does most of the White House openly write articles saying communism's good? Okay? I mean, come on. It does exist. And we're not COINTELPRO because we say it. There has never been one case of communists taking over where they don't rob and steal from people. There has not been one case in modern history. Look at the communists in Russia, China, everywhere. Look at how they're always funded by the big banks on record. Look at how we have seen the government health care plan cheered on by the collectivists, the communists, the socialists, the free ride people. And, lo and behold, they're going to get their Medicare and Medicaid cut. Lo and behold, they're going to get a lower standard of care. It's all a theft. It's all a theft. I guess Dennis Kucinich, according to John, is COINTELPRO then, because he's saying what I'm saying. Here we are day after day exposing the Nazis in every major case of being COINTELPRO. They run both sides of the control paradigm. Everything I'm about is shattering that paradigm. And John calls in and cannot get out of it because he's religiously committed to it, and he will never, no matter if he listens for 1,000 years, ever understand it. Isn't that right, John?
Well, if anybody is committed to dogma, I think it's your mentor, the John Birch Society, who has been intimately involved with COINTELPRO through the 50s, 60s, and 70s, using your kinds of slander, this fire hose of sewer water, smearing people. I've been exposed.
You know what, John?
Obama.
Stop right there. Stop. Put him on hold. I was sent little snippets of George Washington's letter saying, on the contrary, sir, no one is more satisfied of the fact that the Illuminati is operating in the U.S. than I. People said, look, he's satisfied with the Illuminati. He means I'm satisfied it's operating. The next paragraph said it is the most despicable, horrible group of Jacobins and criminals out of France. I've been fighting them in my entire last administration, and I fight them now that I've left. And I hear this about the John Birch Society. It's all made up. It's made up crud. The government tried to infiltrate them and demonize them. It's made up. It's made up. You have no proof, John. Anything else, John?
Yes, just look up those connections between the Nazi CIA network brought in, the FBI, and the COINTELPRO operations collaborating with those groups and John Birch Society during those decades. They were the most scurrilous elements working for the CIA, the FBI, and discrediting people, calling them communists, making up stuff, trying to provoke things. They did it through the private intelligence group, the Western Goals Association, which was allied in Germany with the Galen Nazi organization. So if this is your inspiration and your source of truth about communism and socialism, I exposed Obama long before you did. I exposed this
long before I did. Like I don't even know your last name, John. I know nothing about you. I appreciate your call. I appreciate your delusional call. I know you live in Ohio, or you say you do. I know you call once a month anytime I talk bad about communist. My inspiration is the Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, Constitution. And I have found in John Birch books and videos I've watched, it's all extremely accurate. I mean, it's a fact that big banks fund the communist. It's a fact they're funding all these people that say they're communist in the Obama administration. You're COINTELPRO with what you're doing. I don't believe you're consciously doing it, but I mean, this is how this divide and conquer works. I spent the last few weeks, but really the last 2 days intensely, about how Hal Turner and the Nazis are FBI, and how he's an FBI agent with the proof in federal court. I spend all this time exposing how all of this is going on, and then you call in and accuse me? I'm here fighting against the government takeover of health care. I'm fighting against new wars. I'm fighting against corrupt Rick Perry and K. Belly Hutchinson. I'm good. I know communism's bad. You always call in on the other calls and plug communist websites and stuff and tell me how great they are. Give me a break, man. Just because I don't like communism doesn't mean I'm bad. I mean, it's sick. The Russians declassified all their files on McCarthy and how he was absolutely right and they were worried about him. Because McCarthy found out the army was funding Russia. Joe Stalin was our ally. They helped keep him in power. They gave him all the weapons. They gave him nukes. They fried some patsies. And I've tried to, you know what, John, every time he calls, I explain the basics to him. He doesn't understand it. John, it's a synthesis of the two sides. The big banks needed to have an artificial clash of civilizations. Just like they fund radical Muslims, so they then have a pretext to go into those countries. That's the more modern system. With communism, and it's been declassified, the West, the British and the U.S. and others, and big banks, on record, the people that took over Russia came out of Brooklyn. They shipped them over there, 1917, 1918. I'll finish up with this when we come back, because it's an important issue as we try to shatter the left-right paradigm. The left-right paradigm is communism on one end and fascism on the other. And when you really look at fascism and communism, they're basically the same thing. A boot stomping on the human face forever. I mean, it's just disgusting, John. More calls straight ahead. Professor Carol Quigley wrote a close to 1,000-page book called Tragedy and Hope through a State Department secret grant. It was later republished to the public. Bill Clinton's mentor, head of political science, Georgetown, he explains that British imperial roundtable groups, corporate private government management teams, were dispatched around the globe by the turn of the last century, over 100 years ago, to take down their imperial flags and run up the local flag, but to control it from behind the scenes. And to do that, they wanted to infiltrate, take over, or if they couldn't, destroy all alternative groups that didn't want to be under their domination. And it's not the British Empire that rules the planet. It's that management system run by a consortium of private banks and corporations, England, the United States, Israel, countries in Europe being the chief holders of it. Now, it's on record that Stalin was our ally in World War II. It's on record that Patton was killed because he didn't want to go along with it. It's on record that they wanted to use anti-communist movement in the country to restrict free speech, get control of Hollywood, and create a synthesis. By having communists call for communism, then the government could just call for higher taxes and not sound as anti-American. They moved everything over towards the collectivist angle, which the fascists and the communists always want. The tyrants always want to deal with a strong man, with a thug, with an oligarchy. That's what Carol Quigley explains. He says it's a good thing, and he's for it. And it's publication after publication after publication of these guys explaining how they do it, and you just don't get it. Of course, the FBI and others infiltrated any group they could. That's what we're talking about. That's what I'm exposing here. And, of course, McCarthy was very useful for them. He meant well while he was just going after leftists and people. But as soon as he found out the Army and State Department are basically running Russia, as soon as he found out about that, he was shut down instantly. Now, I go back to the fact that collectivism never works and isn't a good thing. But looking at the false bipolar world, by funding Soviet expansion worldwide, the Soviets got to suppress their people because they were fighting an outside threat, a staged crisis. The United States got to suppress its people, grow a giant military-industrial complex, financed by the same central banks. The Rothschilds going back 300 years to Italy and Germany and France and Britain, financing both sides. This is part of mainline history. And so they get to build up huge centralized governments of different flavors in the U.S., in Europe, in Russia, in Asia. They get to play countries off against each other, divide countries, give half of Germany to the Russians, half to the Allies, have these little wars. Ford and GM-owned factories were making the trucks that were shipped to northern Vietnam. I mean, this is the reality. This is how they control the paradigm and dominate society. And any group that rises up and is legitimate and threatens the power of the elite and their system and the existing political order is infiltrated and taken over.